supposed to let me in.
So you have to turn your speaker off.
Just turn your speakers all the way down so it doesn't feedback through.
Don't forget your back feet.
No, there's, oh, no, I just, thanks to, Tom last meeting. Yeah.
Oh,
I have.
That's all right.
I do.
I just carry them around in case.
I don't have,
needs a
you
pair of
don't have to,
glasses.
I can't use my prescription glasses anymore because I don't.
This is only reader contacts, but now I need yours, so.
Chair.
Bring Laney's chair up, sit next to Catherine or Dusty.
And, which direction?
Get out of the road.
Okay. Nice up there.
It's 9 o'clock, although it says 4:05. Call the meeting to order. Let's do the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dennis and I thought we should have this meeting so we can, anyone said any questions you want to ask. We want to start off with some questions on the pier. And Susan is chairman of the waterfront committee, and she's got to be out of here by 10. She's got a place to be at 10 o'clock, so I'm going to put her on. And we want to take a walk up there. The pictures that we had in our paperwork of where the pier goes weren't very clear. Even with a magnifying glass, you couldn't read some of the things. And I had a question of where it actually goes. So if you want to take a walk up and take a look at that, and Susan will be there to help them and tell them why things are there, and about the current, why it's skipping way out.
This is at the high water mark. That's where it is. So in order to take a, three-dimension and put it flat, I mean, clear, that's a ramp. Well, that's a walkway, and then that's the ramp, so it would. In here, depending on the side. Yep, yeah, so that's the ice cream shack. And the existing tie-ups are going to remain, and they're going to go a little further north. So that's gonna add- This is your additional tie-ups. These are the slips.
The largest slip is 32 feet there.
They're all go out. 32 feet. And this is just the average size of, we just, yeah. We took an average of boats that seem to come up regularly.
Susan, if you had a sailboat that was longer than 32 feet, they could park out on the end. couldn't
They
they?
could, yes,
Oh, sorry, yeah.
it could park over there, it could be on the mooring.
Okay, so if somebody wants to rent a buyer slip for the season, are we gonna have a maximum slip size of 32 feet? I think that, right?
I think, I'm not sure how far they can extend beyond that 32 feet.
Yeah. Probably need to figure that out.
Mhm.
Some of the most vocal people who wanted this, like Don, is like 42 or 3.
Mhm.
Most of those boats that are inclined to get slipped.
Excuse me, can we have the conversation at the table so it can be recorded?
Yes.
So Tom, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question on the size of the slips, which she answered was 32 feet. There, I asked the question whether or not we'll be able to accommodate boats larger than that in the slips, and that's a question we need to get an answer to.
I,
Please hit your button so the mic, green light comes on.
so I know that, when we would, ask for people to pay by the foot, it's overall length, so that includes like a bowsprit and a motor off the back, just say, with some sort of something that comes off the back, maybe keep you dating, whatever. How far they can extend beyond the end of the slip, I'm not totally certain. I don't know if there's a state law or any requirements. We don't know that yet. I would assume, you know, at 10%, I don't know, I'm guessing. So, I mean, it's worth investigating. Do I think we have other options that can accommodate a boat that's bigger, like 50 feet? Just say, you know, we do have other options. And I think some of those rules, in my opinion, ought to be left up to the harbor master, like where he decides to put people.
If this were successful and you're going to increase the number of slips, where would you put them?
Where would we?
Yeah.
Off the north end of the pier? If you're looking,
Would you add on to what you've got there, or would
do
you
you mean beyond this project?
beyond that project? At some further date?
I do know that when we requested that they prepare this study, that they keep that in mind for going further. I don't know the answer to that question right now. I do know that we did ask them to keep that in mind, and the future board position.
My concern is we've got a lot of boats that are on buoys, and that we're taking from the buoys and putting them into the slips, losing the money that we're getting on the buoys, picking up a little bit more on the slips. That's a concern.
I don't know, I'm kind of hopeful that putting the slips in will encourage more boaters to want to be in our harbor. There are people now that choose to go to Pemaquid or Bristol or Booth Bay because of, you know, one thing, it's closer to where they want to go sailing, and then there's some of the current issues and all that stuff. That, you know, I'd like to entice them to stay right in Wiscasset.
What is the capacity of the boat yards near us? Are they full that we could get people, or?
Some are, yeah, yes, I do believe that. Some are, and that was as of when we were answering all these questions last fall.
They're full.
Are they?
So don't we have a wait list for people wanting moorings?
Yes,
So
but
if people move from the moorings to the slip, we can still fill the moorings.
correct.
We-
And the wait list is not with the harbor being full, it's with waiting for the mooring people that actually place moorings to have time to place them in the harbor.
The last I heard, there was 19 people currently on the back, waiting for a mooring.
The
But
way-
I think the way it works is the town licenses the mooring to an individual,
Mhm,
and the individual pays for all the equipment that goes in.
mhm.
All right, so the town doesn't own those moorings, and doesn't allow you to sell them.
We own three, I think.
We have three.
But the 60 or so that are out there, so yes, people would move in, they'd have to make some arrangement to transfer that to to somebody else and
Correct.
leave it down as well.
Yeah. We do seem to think that we have between 10 and 13 moorings that have not been claimed in the last several years, and we're currently following the policies and laws that we have to claim them like abandoned, so that the town can either remove them or remove them and maybe reuse them. That's a
That's good,
process.
that I didn't know. Any other questions for Susan?
Yeah, my major questions I shared with you. I think I'm interested in whether or not you're looking at opportunities to kind of improve the operating side of the plan you put together, or the plan that the team put together, because at least from my standpoint, I had a couple of observations on it. One is that what was shown was a 9-year payback. And I think when I asked that question in the meeting we had, somebody said, no, it's a 5 or 6 year payback, and that wasn't what was in there. And from my standpoint, something like this, should have you said 4 or 5, I think it should be like 3. I'd love to see a much, and not just me, I think it's kind of, I may be wrong, but I think it'd be a tough pill for taxpayers to swallow to say, look, we're gonna invest $175,000 in this, a long-term commitment to run it, but we're not gonna get, it's not showing the kind of return that is attractive, and it takes a long time. Now, I did share with you also a bunch of ways you might think about improving it, because I think your costs looked okay. Your pricing is below market for what marinas around here are charging. And, I gave you a couple of examples. I'm wondering if before it goes to a final vote or a warrant article, is what you're proposing essentially final, or are you looking at ways to say, hey, look, if we could get this more attractive, we're working on it?
Well, if I understand correctly, the purpose of the report was to show that there is a revenue, that the whole project is possible and that there is a benefit to the town, but it's to allow access for recreational boating endeavors for residents and other community, which I think is important. I don't understand about payback because I think, I do understand like as a business thing, but when I think about how towns seem to operate, there isn't really, it's going to offset the budget. The project will offset the waterfront budget, which I think when we are asking for more infrastructure, I think is really important. So, and a lot of the operating costs, we don't know those things yet. We don't know where things are going to be in 3 or 4 years. What we needed was this report with some of the details to the best of our knowledge and ability to be able to apply for this grant and hopefully be successful and then move forward. So, but I think all those policies and how many transient voters and where do these tie up and who pays for electricity, when all those questions need to be hashed out in the future. But I think for right now, we need to build it.
Yeah, I struggle with that. I'll stop talking, but I don't agree with that. And it may be different than the way, some of these kinds of projects have been done in the past, and maybe select board may say, yeah, that's what we need to go ahead and do. But my view is, if we're showing something that is a long payback and doesn't have all the operating considerations worked into it, I think your build cost looks good based on what we see at the yacht club for costs. That looks great. The questions about how you're going to run it, there's not like there's nobody like, except for $10,000, there's nobody to kind of operate the thing and run it on a day-to-day basis. If you need to add that later, if you do hash those things out later, the cost could be much higher and the payback could be longer. So I guess what I was suggesting is another review of the operating side of it and see if, you can bring the revenue up, because there are opportunities to do that and get a shorter payback. Because I don't know that just as a voter, I'm going to look at this and say, there's 10 or 12 people in town that are gonna buy slips, and the rest of the whole town needs to pay for it for 9 or 10 or more years. That would be my
Yes,
concern.
no, I understand where you're coming from. I do want to just point out that 10 years ago, the voters voted to get a bond for $350,000 for the commercial pier. And that has been paid, I don't know how bonds, but that's been paid back. The last payment was this past June. And every year they voted to remove I don't have the right terminology, but take the money out of a bond, one of our investment funds to pay that back, so it wasn't affecting the tax roll. And, you know, I just like to point out that we don't generate a lot of revenue from the commercial pier. So I think this is a step in the right direction. I do know in the current budget that's proposed that there is a stipend for the harbor master and a little bit of money in there for an assistant, you know, dockhand kind of person. So for somebody else to be down there already, and we haven't built this yet. So, you know, I think things are going to evolve.
Terry, want to say something?
Thank you. I am interested in your concerns, Tom, and I did look at some of the things that you had to offer, but I didn't see, did you come up with a way to do this, a
Yes.
payback in 3 years?
I came up
Was
with.
that one of the tabs that I missed?
Yeah, I came up with some ideas, you know, obviously, when you do a business case like this, there are a lot of moving parts and options.
Oh, yeah.
The main things I focused on were, number one, I think the amount that we've assumed in the plan to charge per slip is low. Because you're coming out with like $68 on an average, and I don't know of any place in the area where you pay less than 100. That's an easy one. I think there are opportunities to just load in, what would we charge for power? If you go to any of the places around here, it's $35 a night.
Yeah.
You know, I think you could put a minimum of, let's say, I proposed $100. No matter what the size, marinas will charge. So I came up with a list of those things, right? And I gave kind of, look, you can play with that spreadsheet and do what you want with it. Try different ideas, but I gave you 4 different ways to say, look, you increase the utilization from 30% to 50%. If you increase them, put a minimum on it, charge $100, charge for power. You get that up there. And to your point, you don't know exactly what the market will bear 5 years from now.
Right.
But I do think my view is, when you do a business case for something like this, where the average taxpayer doesn't have a boat, it's gonna say, this looks like it's expensive and it could be more expensive. I would say, put the extra time in to say, how do we make this look better? You know, in a rational way. And I think you can get this thing to be profitable. I think you can get it profitable soon. And I think it's more likely to get people to vote for it if you do that, in my opinion.
I appreciated all of your feedback. I liked the way you phrased at the beginning of your comments that, you know, you never appreciated it when you had put a lot of work into a project and someone objected and they had no constructive ideas. You had 1,000 constructive ideas, and I really appreciated that.
Maybe 2 would be better. But
So just to summarize your thoughts, you're not against doing this. You are for more an increased payback, a faster payback.
I am. I'm in favor of doing something. You know, again, other people aren't, but I certainly am in favor of having something down there. I just would like to see it, you know, more attractive in terms of the financial approach. I'd like to see it something that benefits, it doesn't impact the taxpayer for longer. I kind of take myself out of it as a voter and say, if I'm not a voter, how do I look at this? And I wouldn't vote for it the way it is as a member of the budget committee, with other things on the budget that need to be dealt with.
Yes.
Okay, so one thing I would point out, the money that they're asking for is not going to affect taxation this year because it doesn't come out of taxes. It comes out of the capital fund. Just something for you to consider. and I will throw this out to the select board as well. If you feel this plan needs more work, we can not put it on the ballot for June, because it seems very unlikely to me, even if it passes, that we're gonna be able to get anything done this season at all. There is a general election in November, and there's absolutely no reason why the board can't approve another special town meeting to appropriate the funds then. They come back with a much better plan that we all feel more comfortable with. Just an option.
Can I just clarify? So when you said that, is that true for all grant projects? That if we do get a 50% match, that the portion that the town's responsible from comes out of the capital fund, comes out of our investment fund? Is that?
Not always, but as a rule, yes. And remember, a lot of these grant agencies, they want to see that you commit the funds upfront. They want to know you're committed to this project before they're going to give you this grant. So in order to do this and make sure you're going to get the grant, you've got to have all of your ducks in a row so that when you submit that grant, you can answer, these questions. So we're kind of running out of time for this warrant now for them to do a whole lot more work on this. So that is the option. I mean, it doesn't have to wait until next year. We can have a special town meeting anytime for this type of thing. Tell you people don't like it when you do that, but.
I want to just underline exactly what Dennis said. We are kind of running out of time. A lot of work has been done. If we can manage to answer some of the questions and prepare this for the public, for public consumption between now and the spring vote, it would behoove us to move on it. Most of the work has been done. It seems to me like this is fine tuning. Yeah, and the money, the SHIP funds, they've been available for a while, but they're not gonna be forever. We're running out of time. If we can just work with what we've got right now and find a way to sell it to our taxpayers, that it is a benefit to this entire community to grow our harbor. I keep feel that that's the way we ought to go. It's just my opinion. And I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Dennis, I may not have everything. We only treated it on Zoom.
It looks like it, yep.
Okay, so there's no one there to ask. But any other questions?
Yes, I don't have a question, just a comment, I guess. First thing that comes to mind is haste makes waste. And this is not exactly a small project, it's pretty big. And I think Dennis's suggestion of waiting to put it on a warrant in November makes sense. It gives you people time, and that you're all volunteers, and I know how much time all these things take. And it's, we don't even have a month before this has to be. We're talking days. So my suggestion is to wait until November and give your committee time to get everything so that the taxpayers can look at it and say, well, this will work. I like this. And there'll be more specifics. That's just my suggestion. Thank you.
Any other questions on the waterfront? Does anyone need to look at that drawing anymore? So you might want to take that with you so it doesn't get lost.
So is that,
We're putting it up on the wall.
I'm trying to remember if I have a copy that's that big or not.
I don't know.
I think I might. If I do, I'll post it out in the
You want me to leave this here, so it's just gonna go sit back in the file in my house?
yeah, if you don't mind, that way I can post it outside so people can actually see it.
Do you want the harbor master expansion proposals to
No, all that I have.
the big one, that you can see?
Maybe not.
So do you want it?
Yeah. If I don't need it, I'll just give it back to you.
Susan, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your listening.
Sure. I do want to point out too that, we've already got a better commitment for the waterfront right now with our harbor master. He's implemented some simple cheaper strategies to collect fees. And in 2022, I believe, the last current year, we budgeted revenues at 20,000 and he came in at 32. And that's just by basically answering the phone, being responsive, putting a can down there for people to put their money in. And, you know, I mean, in the past revenues have been for moorings and things like that, have been like $7,000. So
Well, there's no
we have been
question,
missing out.
Very good.
no question that having me down there has been a.
So,
Thanks again.
yes, indeed.
Thank you, Susan.
Have a great day.
This is open. So, does anyone have questions on the budget itself? Anyway.
How do we, or how ultimately are the decisions made on those charitable things, including the Lincoln County Television and the library and the other stuff? Is that?
With, when the budget process is almost over, the selectmen will meet and they'll go item by item. And are we breaking up the charitable things independently?
That's gonna be up to the selectmen. What typically happens is the library gets its own line, and then all the other community organizations are lumped together in one question, which may make it a little more unpalatable for some people.
I'll just say I'm leaning towards separating them into individual items.
That's two of us.
There's a couple in there I'd like to just hold the town on to see if they were in favor of that, like the NPR thing.
I mean, that just expands your ballot longer and longer and
Yeah,
I just like the way we do it here now. I think there's way too many budgets to vote on. And I think people, I mean, our last ballot was 10 pages long. And what happened to me was, luckily I went back through it. I missed a whole page because there's just so many pages. And so but I do think what happens is, you know, you get to a point where people just get sick of checking it off, and I just either don't check it off and we start getting blank ballots, or they just start checking stuff without looking at it. So, I mean, that's how they wanted to do it in this town. Other towns will take, for instance, public safety and lump them in together into one question instead of three. I think it's Newcastle, one of the towns around here, actually just votes one question on their entire budget instead of all of this. But anyways, that's a decision for you guys to make, not me.
Yeah, I would just, something like that, if we were gonna lump them all together, I would say that, you know, maybe we just need a line item for charitable contributions and we give it out to first come, first serve. To put each of those individual things in there, people might have a different opinion about one than they do another, and they want to vote for one and that carries through another. I'd like to be able to deal with that somehow.
Yeah, and there is a danger if you lump them all together, they vote them all down, then the ones that we normally would contribute to year after year won't get any money this year.
This is the problem. If we used to have a town meeting, we actually voted on this stuff, but you were there all day. It was the bad side of it, but you did get to hear people's opinions, and all. They might not come in here and discuss that.
And you actually could amend those articles in the meeting.
Right.
Where you can't with a referendum.
I believe from my training, you could reduce the amount, but you couldn't.
Depends on how your ballots, depends on how your ballots written.
So the process will be either they'll break it out or won't break it out. What do we have to do about that? Do we?
Well, we can take a vote right now and recommend to them
Just trying to
what we
understand
want to do.
we're being asked to do.
How many would like to see that section on charitable broken out individually for voting?
I will pass that along.
I have a question. The budget list for these community organizations has these additions. And are we going to, with a committee, vote to say, well, I don't want, for example, Waldo Community Action Partners. I have no idea what that is.
That's for the selectmen.
Okay, so they, and I'll have
That's one of the reasons,
Yeah,
things like that, I'd rather see an individual.
yeah. Okay. And so they will make, that's right. They can make
Dennis, on,
decisions.
one of them is Channel 7, Lincoln County TV.
Yes,
They're asking for how much?
$13,500.
What's it costing us now?
Beg your pardon?
What's it costing us now? Zero?
We haven't contributed to them for a while.
No, I don't mean for them. I'm talking about, doing it via Zoom and all.
Oh,
Oh, well, the Zoom account, which we'd end up keeping anyways, is, I think around $500 a year. YouTube doesn't cost us anything.
Yeah.
So there's no real advantage to LCTV doing it over YouTube, because it's still not gonna be interactive. It's still just gonna be recorded
Right.
for people to see, unlike what we're doing here, that people can actually participate from home. And we still can simultaneously broadcast it on YouTube. They made the point that not everybody has internet, which is true. I think there are less people today that have cable than there are that have internet, and most people are doing streaming services as opposed to cable. Well, let's say most, but that trend is growing, that they're doing the streaming stuff, so.
I had a question that occurred to me after the meeting, because I've never watched Lincoln County television, so I have the first clue as to what's on there. They made a big thing about how they publish, or they put school basketball games and so forth on, and it's a high proportion of what they do. They do any Wiscasset school stuff at all?
I guess I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, if, aside from the town meeting or the meetings and so forth, if there's other things like that, I'd probably be more inclined to, but I'm not aware of anything that's on there in Wiscasset at all. It's like if we're paying $13,000 to have them do, prep school basketball games from some other town, I'm not sure.
That's a pretty high price.
I agree.
Huh?
That's a high price.
I'd rather give more money to Lifeline in Maine, which benefits a lot of.
And if I remember correctly, and this was before I was here, did they have some kind of a blowout with LCTV, and that's why they stopped contributing to them?
Something happened, I don't know,
Something
they
happened.
asked for a ridiculous amount of money, and we were already paying them $3,000 or $4,000 a year. But at this point, with YouTube, it doesn't cost us anything. And I can't imagine anybody with a computer or any internet access that doesn't watch something on YouTube. I don't think we need it, but that's my personal thing. Not for $13,500, we don't need it. For any amount, actually. So. Guess I'll show up at the next.
Robert, any concerns?
Not yet.
Yeah.
That's working on it.
Sharon?
Questions?
Anyone? Dennis, you got anything you want to tell us?
I'm just here to answer questions. I'm not here to try to influence.
No, I mean, anybody like-
Any matters,
No, but if there are budgets here that you guys can agree on and take a vote today, that would help speed the process along a little bit, I think. The only budgets that I anticipate will change or have any discussions, the ones that I recently cited that have been updated, because the select board hasn't had a chance to discuss those yet, so.
Can I ask then, the open-ended question on the file you sent us with the new budget?
Mhm.
What are like the big notable changes? I'm sure there's a whole raft of tiny things, but are there any things that we, without going through and trying to match things up, which I'm frankly not inclined to do, are there any biggies?
So the select board asked me to put another full-time employee into the Parks and Rec department, which I did. That doesn't change that budget a whole lot because the person's already working anyways. They're just working less than 30 hours a week, so now they're working 40. The big change in that are the benefits because of the insurance. I did the same thing with the EMS. I added one more full-time person to EMS. And that's the same thing. They're already working anyways. It's just the benefits. What I did do was take the full-time fire chief completely out of the budget and just leave it as it was. So that helped us offset the increase in benefits and some of the hours that we were pushing in the other direction. The other thing that's in there that they asked me to do was put together a budget for a full-time, not planner, because we don't want to use that term. But for an economic development type person, that was $109,000. There, so that's the highlights of all of that.
I have a question. Park and recs, so I see it going up 168,000. That's
Well,
not,
it was up anyways, because we put another full-time position in it. It's up substantially because we had to up the electricity rates by 40%, and we had to up the heating oil by 30 or 40%. Hopefully, the heating oil at least will simmer down a little bit. If oil prices come down, electricity is not going to, it's gonna be there. So, I mean, without looking, those two things alone are probably amount to over $100,000 of that.
my
of that
question
revenue.
is, do fees go up for things?
They can,
Because of the, like, we need to generate income to take that on, I think, as taxpayers.
they can. I mean, every director since I've worked here has always been reluctant to want to go too high on fees because they're afraid it's going to drive people away.
But we are below, like, say, the YMCA or where substantially below.
In some cases, I think we are, yes.
So below and also get the swimming pool, which some don't have. It's a big draw.
It's a big draw,
And
it's
big
also a
expense.
huge expense. That's one of your biggest expenses up there. Income for the swimming pool is about $50,000 a year. Just the aquatics director's salary alone eats that up. That doesn't include the lifeguards and the swim instructors and the heat and water and everything else that goes on with it. So, the pool is a huge expense for that up there. It is also a big draw. Should they be charging more for it? Yeah, probably. I don't know the answer to that. But it is, I mean, it's certainly, and ultimately, even if the director says he doesn't want to raise the fees, it's up to the select board to make that decision. If the select board says we're gonna raise the fees, then we raise the fees.
Yeah, I'd asked this question before, and I don't know that I understood the answer exactly. How do you raise the fees to the other towns, Edgecombe and Westport Island? I mean, it sounded to me like they don't pay very much at all. And it sounded to me like there was the process was we ask, they say no, and we settle on something. Do we have the ability to like just levy a % increase on them, say our cost went up X and now it's gonna be up by the same percentage at a minimum, or do they have the ability to say, no, we're just not gonna pay anything and drop this whole thing?
Oh, they have the ability to say that when they go through their own budget process. I mean, we can ask the town to contribute whatever we feel we want. If it's $5,000 or $10,000 or 10% or 20%, that's certainly up to us. They're gonna go through their budget process and say, okay, well, we'll put this on the ballot, and the voters then say yes or no.
Yes.
Same idea here. So who knows how they're going to go.
Is that something that we just ask for or advise on as the budget committee, or the top line is kind of out of our purview? Because it just seemed to me like the increase, the order of magnitude of the increases we're looking at this year dwarf the amount they're paying. So the downside of risk of losing what they're paying isn't that much relative to the upside of getting to pay more. in my two cents.
Our authority begins and ends with recommending to the select.
Okay,
Which,
so we can make a recommendation
Yeah.
like that?
And you could show up and make the argument to the board as well, that would be helpful.
I'll do that.
Because I mean, the way you're thinking.
They're gonna kick me out of these meetings if I keep coming.
Well,
saying
No,
something.
actually,
I like what you're saying, and that sounds good to me, but I'd want you to come help make that argument to everyone else too. as
Yeah.
well.
Is that just at any select board or?
any citizen.
Well, I mean, we're having another budget meeting with the select board on Tuesday.
So I can
certainly-
straighten up that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that.
Is that a Zoom meeting on Tuesday or is that?
Yes, it's both.
It's both?
Yeah.
The Alden is voting on ambulance service today. Us versus Lincoln County.
Yeah, I was just texting Aaron about that.
we dodged a bullet with them. They came here one year, undercut us by $70,000. And then they withdrew it after we had it ready to go on the warrant, so we had to. they
Oh,
said,
CLC.
Don't do it. So we told everyone not to vote for it. They may not have voted for it anyway, but they knocked it down. Since then, they've increased their almost 100% for a couple of years in a row. At that time, they jumped it way up that year. It would have been a great loss, especially they wanted us to give them our ambulances and stuff like that.
Waldeboro covers all of all of Friendship and part of Jefferson. They increased their fee to Jefferson by 1,000% this year. They went from $7,000 a year to $114,000. And Jefferson had no choice. You know, they don't have, there's no other service for them to go with, so they have no choice but to do it. But that's kind of the danger that you run into when you start contracting some of these services with outside people. You know, like the water. I know that people like to talk about that, and, you know, in some instances, it probably, you know, it might pay off, but in something like that, I'm not for it. I've worked in private EMS for a very long time. I know how they operate, so.
Question, Tom, you want to speak to the selectmen about fees for the rec center?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Can we authorize him to speak for the budget committee in total, rather than just himself?
I don't have a problem with that.
How about a motion?
I move that we allow Tom Joyce to
Speak for us.
speak for the budget committee at a board of selectmen's meeting reference fees.
I second.
Second. Twice, all those in favor, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Select board meeting. Committee, we found that slow. You might put on that.
You would speak to unanimous. It's up to, we don't have to tell them how much, but just they should be increasing. Other places should be too.
Thank you.
So I have just one other clarification. I don't have any other personal questions on the budget. I think I understood most of it, but could you repeat, Dennis, again? I make you say things twice.
Okay.
The comment you made about, as we talked about the waterfront project, that the money for the year, the first year that is invested, our portion of the match doesn't hit the taxpayers, it comes out of the capital fund.
Correct.
Is that true? So if we did White's Island as an example, you know, where, let's say it was $1 million and our portion of it was $500,000, just to take that waterfront project aside for a moment, that $500,000 would have to be committed so that to the extent the grant got approved, the money was available. Is that just like earmarked out of our investment account, or is it, because where does it come from? You said it comes out of the capital.
Yeah, it comes out of the investment account. So various people refer to that in different ways.
Right.
It's a capital accounts, investment accounts, reserve account, whatever, it comes from the same place.
Okay.
You know, if we voted for this money in June for this, it would be appropriated. It wouldn't come out of the account until we actually spend it.
Right.
If we didn't get the grant, it would never come out, it would just be there.
Okay.
Same with the White's Island thing. They just want a lot of these grant makers want to know that you're committed to this project and that you have the funds available, because they're competitive grants and there are other people that they could give it to if we're not going to be fully committed to going ahead and doing it.
So, but it still hits the taxpayers ultimately. Unless we should say, we're gonna take a permanent reduction in the investment account and make it up.
Well, I mean, if you spend all the investment account and don't have anything left, then yes, eventually it's going to hit the taxpayers. But that's, you know, the way it's gone, that scenario hasn't played out because of how well the account has done. You know, we've got way more in it than what we started with. Doesn't mean that it can stay that way. I mean, you've been around to know that the economy goes to hell.
Yeah, I've been wrong every year the last 3 years, but.
Well, Dan Lay said the same thing. That's why they've done this 4.5%, because that's what was started back in 2010, after we were coming out of one of the worst recessions that we've ever had. And the market's just way outperformed anything that they thought it would do. So, I mean, you know, some people get stuck on the 4.5%, and I get it, but
That's a great number.
you also got to look at your circumstances as you go along, and can we do better than that? And do some things that we need to get done and take advantage of the market that we've had.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those tricky things where I think it's essentially, you know, quote unquote, free money, where we're gonna make it up. You spend 200 grand and you're gonna make 200 grand in the market and you're back even. It feels free, because it kind of is free. But, you know, I think that whether it comes out of an investment comes out of an existing tax year billed to the Joe taxpayer, or it comes out of that account, you still have to have some investment discipline that says, what do we expect in terms of, you know, payback or any other metric you choose? So you can look at it and say, do I want to do White's Island, or do I want to do a plumbing plant? You know, you know what I mean? So that was kind of my point. It may be moot in the grand scheme of
The
things.
answer is it doesn't come out, it doesn't increase your tax rate, but it comes out of your savings account.
Yeah,
But also you get the grant, right, that replaces.
No, it doesn't replace it.
No, it doesn't replace it.
No, match, you need match funds.
so if it costs $1 million to do White's Island, we apply for the grant, the maximum you're gonna get is half of that. So you're on the hook for it. So my understanding, which was wrong, was that the taxpayers get hit with that in their tax bill. But then it's clarified is that no, that doesn't happen. It gets assigned, allocated out of the investment account, so it doesn't hit your tax bill. But
Where it hits your tax bill is the annual maintenance that gets done every year. That's where.
And how much we're charging for slips and things like
And all that
that
stuff.
too.
And that's where I've said this repeatedly, you know, that I don't want to put on more infrastructure that goes on the backs of the taxpayers when it comes to the waterfront, where we've got enough as it is right now, my opinion.
Same thing, if a company moves in, they say, well, we'll put our own road in and we'll put in our water and our sewer, but you maintain it. Well, in 15 to 20 years, that's a cost to us. Going back to that 4.5%, you were gonna talk to someone about that.
Yeah, I reached out to Dan, he didn't get back, excuse me, I'm dealing with a bit of an issue,
Go ahead.
so. He didn't get back to me, which is not unusual for him, it usually takes a day or two. I may end up having to leave to go to this all-in-town meeting. And so,
When we talk about kicking the can down the road, I think of more like a snowball. And we're pushing it the next year, but when you do it, it's getting bigger and bigger. Pretty soon you get a snowman and a snow fort, and stuff like that, because it gets more expensive every year. And your cost, you know, if you're not replacing something, you're repairing it, and that's an extra cost too. I'd like to, my comment at the selectmen, at the joint meeting was, let's go beyond the 4.5%. Let's take care of all of this stuff that we got in capital improvement in 1 year. I don't know what the percent comes out to, but I think it's well worth doing it one time.
Yeah.
And then from there on in, you're dealing with a brand new slate. And from your capital expenditure, like we've got the spreadsheet, because when we have to replace something or what the repairs might be, we can handle it. It's not free money, we're taking it out of our savings, but it reduces the percentage we're gonna make on our savings, but we've done very well for quite a few years. I don't know what we're gonna do this year. I look at that stock, then it's like up and down all day long. Dow Jones.
Yeah, I stopped looking.
Yeah.
You don't need to.
No, I just occasionally when I'm getting on, it comes up anyway.
Yeah.
I can see it, oh, it's up, well, now it's down 500, now it's up 300, all during one day.
Somebody's making money.
Yeah, I had a stock that I got in, I helped someone get a job and I asked them to follow up with them. Wow, is that, I'm freezing because they put the wall out, they keep expanding, things are going well. So the company made the barcodes and the barcode readers when they came out. So I invested in it and I made some good money and I sold it. And then but I kept watching it, and then I noticed at some point that it would go down to a certain point and then it would go up and then it would go down and up. So I when it went down, I bought in again. Before it got up to where it usually goes, I got up 3 or 4 times. You gotta be with us?
I don't know, I can't get a hold of her, so I don't know, I probably will have to go. Because it would be pretty unprofessional for us not to have a representative there.
I'd like to see another motion. I was just talking about taking more than the 4.5% out, clearing off, taking care of what we need for capital expenditures. And I'd like to see a motion on that. If we recommend to the selectmen that we do that.
I couldn't tell you the last time they took 4.5% out of that. I think they've taken more out of that.
Well, I'm talking about 1,800,000.
Yeah, some of that we can, some of that I can kind of whittle down a little bit. The fire truck, we can do a lease purchase on for a period of 5 years for like 2.5%. I don't like taking on more debt. I think the town, you know, when the town's sitting on $18 million, I don't know why we want to go into debt, but that's just my thoughts on it.
As chairman, I shouldn't make a motion.
Do you want me to do it?
Yeah.
I'll try to do it. So I would move that the budget committee recommend to the select board that on a one-time basis, we take from the investment account however much is required to cover all of the capital investment requests for this year, up to that $1.8 million number. Is that clear?
Second.
Discussion.
How does that affect what we were talking about with the waterfront project? Because we were talking about Lake Mount.
It's in there.
Is
So,
it in there? It's
yeah,
in that list?
it was in that list.
In the capital list?
Yes.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter. I mean, you guys, you know, this, if the selectmen decide they don't want to put it in there, just reduce the amount a little bit, that's all.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Anyone have anything else on the budget?
Eric's gonna be able to go, so I'll say.
Anyone want to go home? Motion,
So
go ahead.
are you guys gonna meet again or to do your recommendations or?
Meeting Tuesday with the selectmen.
Yep,
That should be the last one until we get the sheet of where we recommend the voters, yes or no.
so you guys do want to see the warrant then before you, I mean, that is how the ordinance is written, so.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Well,
You see the bottom line, whatever it is, it's already in print.
Who actually drafts that, Dennis?
I do,
Can you do that yourself?
yeah, well, Kathy does, well, I don't know, she's been out for 3 weeks, I've had to do all my job and hers too, and I haven't done it all that well, so.
Yes, you have.
What would we do without you?
You have performed admirably.
They're understaffed in here.
Do you want us to vote on some of that today?
It's up to you guys, if you know which ones that you're fine with and, or if you want to wait, it doesn't matter.
What do you think?
I mean, I'm basically gonna ask the board to vote on the ones that they're all good with in one vote
When are you gonna do that?
Tuesday. So I can get as much of this warrant done. So there's a new, Linda has to do a new process this year with the warrant. She actually has to physically put it in online instead of just sending them a PDF draft like we used to. So the more I can get done of it, the more she can do as we go along instead of waiting until the last minute. So, but we can make, I can make it work if you want to wait. That's totally fine.
I'd like to wait.
Makes sense. Yeah, I don't personally have any objection to any of them except the charitable events one that we talked about. And I don't understand how the airport works. It just sort of is. So I'll ask a question about the airport budget that we're looking at this year. Is any of that optional? Or is that all based on the federal contracts and other commitments? That's what's asked for is. We're stuck with that number.
For the airport budget?
Yeah.
I don't know what would be. I mean, the airport budget itself is optional, that's ours.
Yeah, so you could say we don't want to pay for any of it, but I'm just.
No, you can't say you don't pay for any of it.
Okay, that's-
Yeah.
So that's the problem that you run into with the airport. The town started taking FAA money
Yep.
for the airport. And now you're committed to running this airport. If you say, we don't want the airport no more, we're gonna do away with it, all of that FAA grant money that you've gotten over the years, you need to then pay
So
back.
this is kind of what I'm asking. I think it had like a $90,000 budget or something like that, which is not an extraordinary amount of money. But if the budget committee stared at that and said, we vote no, what happens?
Well, your vote actually, Well, it carries no water until you get to the ballot box, where people do pay attention to that. It's like, okay, we're gonna vote down the airport. I would have to recommend to the selectmen that they bring that back up for another meeting.
So what you're saying is that if the town votes no on the airport line item, that actually can't be.
It can be, but you're gonna take a big hit in that investment account.
Yeah, that's
And
what
that's the elephant in the room, and that's what I tell people when they start in about, well, we can get grants for this, and grants for that, grants.
Yeah.
Hold on a minute, grants are okay, they get you to a certain point, but after that point, you're responsible moving forward.
Yeah, it's just on the
It's just not
airport
fair.
one, not understanding the puts and takes of that arrangement or how it all works. It's hard to vote on it and say, if I vote no on this, what are the downstream impacts? And you say, it's gonna get super expensive in ways that
And this is a conversation that the town's had for several years, back and forth, because there are people that are opposed to the airport.
Sure, I know,
However, if you look at the revenue this year,
it's better.
it should offset the whole budget,
Yeah,
or
okay.
at least most of it. And most of that's because of the lease that we have on the solar project.
That's what I was gonna ask you about the lease of the solar project.
But if you're opposed to the airport, talk to this man next to you for a few minutes.
Pilot?
I got an education on the airport when I first started.
Yeah, I'm either going to shut up or need to.
No,
No, that those two things
He wants to close it too.
So
No, I just wanted to know why we were talking about closing the school.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about closing the school, if the airport wasn't making money, I wanted to know why we weren't talking about closing the airport.
Yeah,
But the
that's
answer
not
to
what I
that was very simple, it's making money.
It makes
It's a
money.
good asset to the town, the local businesses use it, it's not a drain.
Because it's weird, because when I looked at the warrant article last time I voted, it looked like you couldn't tell that from the warrant article.
Well, it's tough,
It's
it is
expensive.
tough to tell from the warrant article, so we do put in there the information that says the appropriation will be offset by X numbers of dollars in revenue. So the revenue that the airport generates, the direct revenue that it generates, and it has to go to the airport by FAA regulations, we cannot use that for any other purpose, it has to be used for the airport. If it makes a profit, it has to be used for the airport, they're gonna use that to offset any grants.
That's all good.
That they get. What's not included in that revenue, however, are the property taxes that we get on the hangars that are owned by the various individuals that own them. That just goes into the property tax commitment. So when you add that to the revenue that we get, the airport doesn't cost us anything.
Okay, see, that's not good. Every time I leave my house, my wife says, ask them about the airport. Because I don't like the airport. So I have the applications, listen,
It's,
on Zoom. So-
Yeah, they've done a problem to get it.
It'd be super.
You rent space there, if it's not airport related, you're not supposed to rent it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it'd be great to have that more easily communicated, that this is a money-making, the investment you're making in the tax dollars is making money for the town.
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems the town has had for years, and I'm not blaming anybody, is that we just don't communicate well. And we're working on that.
Okay.
I actually have I think an intern I'm gonna hire to come in and help us do some communication stuff.
And it's a good place for those light lights.
Steve Williams sent me.
absolutely, it is
What
not.
the airport's making.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, so that could-
We've used it several times.
And it does bring business in. I mean, local businesses use it, people fly in here. People do fly in there just to come to lunch.
Sure.
And we've had
We're able to do that.
We've had a reduction in landings this year because we used to be able to get a car from Newcastle that we could rent for people to fly in, and they stopped doing it. So we're gonna end up buying a car just so we can have a rental car, because it does bring people in, and that airport is busy, it does, it is, yeah.
Okay.
And
Any other discussion? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Dennis.